Hi, friends. Welcome to Interviews, Voices of Our Herbal Elders. This is my opportunity to talk to some of my dearest friends, people who have not only influenced my herbal work, but also have had a major influence on the revitalization of American herbalism. Most of us began our herbal work around the same time, in the early 1970s and 80s, when herbalism was still mostly underground, a place where plants actually thrived quite well. I love hearing people tell their herbal stories of how they began their herbal work, who and what inspired them, their favorite plant and healing stories. And I felt that others would be interested in hearing them as well. In fact, I felt it was important to capture these stories before this generation of elders passed on, as we're all destined to do.
I can hear the song of a bird, and I can feel the sky. I know that I'm parts of the earth when I see the sunrise. I am thankful to be here.
So, my welcome guest today is my dear friend and fellow herbalist, Kat Maier. Kat is the founder and director of Sacred Plant Traditions. She's been in clinical practice for over 30 years and is a beloved and respected teacher at universities, conferences, and herb schools worldwide. One of her great accomplishments has been to train clinical herbalists who have gone on to open their own apothecaries, herb schools, and clinical practice. Kat is a founding member of the nonprofit Botanical Mobile Clinic, which provides accessible herbal medicine to local communities. And she's the author of the immensely popular Energetic Herbalism, which is rapidly becoming a textbook at many herb schools, and also the co-author of Bush Medicine in San Salvador Island, Bahamas. Kat is a passionate steward of the plants and served as president of United Plant Savers, and she was the first recipient of the organization's Medicinal Plant Conservation Award. And there's so much more I could tell you about Kat, but you can find her full bio on her website and also on this podcast. So, Kat, thank you so much. It's an honor and a joy to have you join me today.
Absolutely, Rosemary. Igualmente, without a doubt. This is going to be so much fun. And I love that you really are doing this because we're realizing that archival information and our stories and we're aware enough now to really have these archives live. And so this is such a brilliant project. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you, honey. Well, I was seeing our dear beloved friends passing
Yeah.
on and just realizing we are those elders and that it's so important that we capture some of these stories. So, yeah. Yeah, so you and I have traveled together, we've taught together at conferences and schools and served together on the board of United Plant Savers. And we've been friends for, I think, over 30 years. But I was trying to recall how we met. And, I actually couldn't remember. Do you remember our first meeting, where we met? How?
Well, I remember the first time we physically met, and I'm not certain. Maybe I told you this story. Maybe it's in the intro to my book, but it's quite a profound story that I really love telling students in the sense that. So I was in the Peace Corps, and which was fabulous. And growing up, I was healthy. I didn't grow up with any herbalism. There was no plant medicine in my world, in my mother's or even grandmother's world, and I didn't have a lot of experience with them, unfortunately. So when I went to the Peace Corps, that was the first time that I was given these herbal teas, and plant medicine was alive and thriving. And so there's a story of coming back, and this will lead to my introduction to you. But when I came back from the Peace Corps, I thought I was going to work in international development, and I went to DC and I went to graduate school and public health, and I was on my way to really make these changes and preserve traditional medicine. And I had this existential crisis while I was in graduate school because, for some odd reason, like the second day of graduate school, I found myself elected to the president of the student council, which I did not want. I had to work, I had a life. This is the last thing I wanted. But so there I was in DC, and I thought, it was all research. It was all research paper and development. So I thought, we are living in the city where all of these organizations exist. So I put together this file and I went around to all these NGOs, like about 100 NGOs, and I was interviewing
That's
anyone
amazing.
I could meet about development and third world and healthcare and public health. And I said, do you really believe that your work leaves the paper and, gets into the village? And it was amazing, the honesty of not really or sometimes.
Oh,
And this was before I was really aware of that whole savior, white people going into third world. And I wasn't aware of that, but something was not feeling right.
yeah.
So I left graduate school and I went to work at this wilderness school, which is a whole other story. But that was amazing. But I finished that and I'm like, plants. I went to the wilderness school to study plants.
Wow.
And what next? And I thought, how can I save traditional medicine in Africa if we don't even have any? Like, where's our traditional medicine? So literally out of the blue, on this mountain in Strasburg, Virginia, the California School of Herbal Study brochure showed up. And I don't know if you remember have I told you this story?
A long time ago, I remember a little bit.
Yeah. So it was when you all sent out those incredible brochures that were a calendar.
Oh,
You
yeah.
sent the whole calendar and it had all the days and all the field trips. And I got this and I was like, oh, I can't believe this place exists. And again, I had really no background with herbal medicine. So I called the school immediately and lo and behold, you answer. And so I kind of didn't know. I was like, oh, is this Rosemary? And I kind of didn't know what it all meant. And you know how you put these things out to the universe? If this is there and if this is there, then it must be right. We're testing spirit and we
Yeah.
kind of need different affirmations. So you said, oh, you should come and this is great and you have a place to live. And here's this friend of mine, Gretchen. And
Oh,
Gretchen was my sister's name. And anyway, so I went through this whole process. And in the end, my notion was still to serve low income, to get into a low income, whether rural or urban. And I
wow.
just thought, how am I going to bring this medicine to these people or to this population or to these communities? And so I chose, another path, and that's when I became a physician assistant, because I thought I could work in rural clinics, then I'll learn herbal medicine. And that whole story is interesting in itself. But after PA school, I went to Neha. So I became a
Oh,
physician
really?
assistant, went back to the mountains of Virginia because that's where the plants were calling me.
Yeah.
I still hadn't had, real herbal training, but it was the plants.
Yeah.
So I was feeling very isolated, very alone. We had no online. There wasn't this incredible Instagram community.
Yeah.
And somehow or another, I found out about Neha, and I'm in Virginia. So I drive up to Neha, and that was the first time I met you
Oh my
at a
God.
Neha meeting. And when you met me, you just shone your light. You began inviting me to conferences. It was that sun in my seed of teaching and herbalism, just as you do, and just as your grace, allows things to grow. It was in some community building that maybe 20 of us were gathered for the weekend talking about NEHA stands for New England Herb Association.
The
Is that what it
Northeast
is?
the Northeast.
Northeast, right.
Yeah.
So the Southeast girl had to travel north to find her flock, but that's the first time we met. That's a long
Oh God.
answer.
When you're telling these stories, this is one of the things I love so much about just sharing and listening is to these old stories is the memories just come back. I remember that. And the Northeast Herb Association was formed because when I moved to New England from California, I recognized right away there were herbalists in New England, but they hadn't come together. It's like they didn't know who was in the holler next, who was over the mountains. So it was an
Exactly.
opportunity to bring us all together so that we could network and learn and share with one another. And also I remember when you were at that gathering, because the light that you carried just beamed out, right? It was like, I think it was two beams meeting each other going, aha, we're on the same path.
Love at first sight. Love at first sight.
Love at
Yeah.
first sight.
So
Yes.
definitely. And then, we've used your curriculum in our school, and then, the rest is herstory, after the conferences and,
Yeah. Yeah,
all
so
of that.
you mentioned your physician's assistant training, which is really unusual among herbalists, and I know that you've talked about it oftentimes, how it's just allowed you to kind of bridge the medical world with the herbal world, and I think it's really amazing how you've used that language and kind of incorporated it into your herbal practice without diluting your practice. It's been more like a tool for you. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that and how you've managed to weave and bring these two trainings, these very different modalities, but bringing them
Hmm.
together into like a holistic form?
Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, I consider myself a recovering scientist. I love science. I love that lens. I really think that that is the true psychedelia of our planet when we think of constituents and fractals and that whole molecular expression. It's very, very cosmic. That truly is the cosmology. And so in my path and trying to put together what does it mean to be a healer? The original seed was when I was 6 in a Catholic school, and Jesus was the archetype, and I didn't have Buddhism or Hinduism, and it was how are we healers? And it wasn't a religious life, but there was always the seed of the sacred. But how do we translate that, and how do we learn the language where we can be most effective? So during that time, I thought, well, allopathy, the majority of our population is going to clinics, and allopathy is the predominant language, if you will. And so I went to PA school at Hahnemann. Interesting. It was Hahnemann Medical School
It is
in
interesting.
Philadelphia.
Wow.
And they had this teeny little glass cabinet off in the corner of the lobby, with the homeopathic remedies. And of course, there was no mention of homeopathy. But I did go to Hahnemann, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was intensive. It was 2 years. And they said, we can do about 80% of what a physician can do. And the PA program was born out of the Vietnam War, because here are all these incredibly trained medics. They're coming home.
Wow.
They have amazing skills. But how do we help them merge and integrate into the community? And that was one of the origins of the PA program. So you got,
Wow.
deep dive into some great clinical skills. And I really sort of wanted to be that country doc where you can stitch and do a whole lot of things. So that was an intensive 2 years, great internships. And so I'm returning to Virginia, and I send out all these letters to doctors. I had a dream. I knew exactly what mountain to go back to. I came back,
Yeah.
and I sent all these letters, and I would have been, phenomenal. I was a woman. I
Yeah.
was PAs are a lot cheaper. Like, I checked all the boxes, right? You don't have to pay a PA as much. And so I got all these no's, just, oh, thank you, we'll keep you on the file, and etc. And then I had another dream that I went to this old healer who I had known in Virginia, and he said, well, you have to come to this herb farm, and you have to meet these friends of mine. So I went to La Dama Maya Herb Farm in Luray, Virginia, and it was this moment of, wow, this is it. And
Wow.
so I would say that, we have a dream, and then there's this dream dreaming us. And when our dream and the dream dreaming us really merge, there's this incredible, synchronicity. It's that moment that's incredibly right. And it was against everything in my body. I made minimum wage. I didn't even have money for gas to go back over the mountain. I had to spend the night in this, crazy old Victorian house. They taught me biodynamics. They had their
Wow.
herb farm and biodynamics. So, I had this nice little plan, and I'm sort of telling this story, gearing it towards, the younger listeners, and how do you find your way on the path? And, it was, I had this plan. I was going to be a PA for like 5 or 6 years, learn all the rashes, learn all the techniques that I would need, little minor surgery and sometimes major surgery. And then after I get all of that skill set, I'm going to go then do the plants. But you know how it is.
I do.
The dreams just are impactful, and they're not convenient. It's that inconvenient truth in a way, but I don't want to allude to that. But so there I was. That was the beginning of my training, and
Wow.
then I studied in the mountains. And we've all said this as older herbalists, without so many teachers easily accessible, we really apprentice to the plants.
Yeah.
So I'd have my job and I'd go into the mountains and I'd take my books, and we just knew the plants. We were with them all the time.
Yeah.
And just studying them. And then you'd have Norma, or there were definitely teachers, without a doubt. I'm not trying to say it was a complete desert, but that was 30 years ago.
Yeah,
It took me going to New England,
Yeah.
to realize, oh my goodness, there's more of me.
Yeah.
So the part of the PA is, that's a language. That's, a magnificent language. And so, truth be told, I mean, I have worked as a PA some, kind of stepping in mutual aid and different actions
Yeah.
and the demonstrations. They kind of put me at the allopathy table
Yeah.
because they didn't have a lot of docs. That happened in Standing Rock. But the way I thought I was going to use it was really different. But what it did was it enabled me to speak a language that allowed people to arrive and feel safe.
Yeah.
Oh, she knows what ulcerative colitis is. She knows what these words are. I could send them back. And so in some ways it is that bridge, and that isn't so necessary today because all of these incredible clinical programs, they're doing deep dives in A&P, and, they're getting all of these skills, and, but that's taken an evolutionary time. And so that was the intention. And I also really wanted to learn about the medications because I know that that's all part of our life.
Yeah.
And it was also the discipline of it.
Yeah.
It was sleeping morning, noon, and night. I mean, the interview was so incredibly rigorous.
Yeah.
And so it taught me that rigor. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's Tai Chi or herbalism, there's something in that process.
That's beautiful.
And the science, is just so mind-blowing. And it teaches, those energetics, polyphenols, all the berries, all the antioxidants, they're cooling,
Yeah.
oxidation's heating. And so you then translate the energetics into what those chemicals are really saying.
It's just like learning how to speak more than one language, right? Like so many of us only know the language of English, and that language is so limited. And then when you expand that to learn other languages, it actually allows you not only words, but also expression and feeling. So, and I love what you said. I agree also, like there are a few herbalists who are amazing bridge walkers who really know and understand allopathic and modern medicine in the language of that, and also bridge walk into the natural world. And what you've done, what I love so much is it's not only just into the herbal world, but it's you take it even, I would say even deeper, kind of into the earth and into the heavens, so that you really interweave spirit and the dreams and then, our sacred plant medicines and into this marvelous like system. It's very, very beautiful. And you make it accessible to people. Like every workshop I've ever sat in, and I have sat in a lot of your classes, is you're able to mingle these traditions in a way, and the languages in a way that it makes it easily understandable, which I think is why you're such a wonderful and popular teacher. You take the heavens and you bring it down into this marvelous technical language and then ground it in the earth and then make a feast out of it. So it's pretty beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely our birthright and sovereignty, and uh, it's just super
Yeah.
cool. Like it's like so amazing. It's like Jim Duke, he wanted to dedicate his life with science to prove these Amazonian wonders and wizards. And,
Yeah.
it is that language. And I think it's funny, even a holistic framework, body, mind, and spirit, sometimes I feel that's still separating.
Yes.
Spirit doses. Well, it's physiologic, it's the
Yeah.
same. And so it's just so interesting to see the evolution. And
Yeah.
I don't want to say maturation, but it's really more of a consciousness.
Yeah.
We're really entering such a profound consciousness around the
Yeah.
plants.
So true. So I wanted to ask you, just have you share a little bit about the botanical mobile clinic, because it's, I know there are several of them that have been started in this country, and it's just such a beautiful model. And I know that you were very instrumental in helping create this, and I know it's something that you're very involved in and also very proud about. So do you mind sharing a little how that worked and maybe even how it began? Love to hear that story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try not to make the origin story too long. You know how we are with our stories. Um, so I think it might have started when I had my first crush on Lorna Mana Braddock.
Yes.
And her work. I want to say crush on her work. I want to honor her and respect her. But when I met Lorna, who was an Atlanta based herbalist, and now she's mostly in Dublin,
Yeah.
I watched her mobile clinic in her VW van, and then her work at the Harriet Tubman clinic. And she was doing foot work, like serious foot baths, foot
Wow.
healing for unhoused people. And her theory was, their feet are their home. They have to walk. They have to have foot care. And so diabetes and like some serious things. So she was outrageous. What Lorna did, she grew up in Atlanta during civil rights. Her parents were amazing activists.
Wow.
So she had this in her genes, and just a brilliant herbalist. And so
Yeah.
when I saw that, it really sparked kind of taking me back to that Peace Corps, that service. Okay, I have my practice, I have my school, and then, it's white students, and, really looking at the populations in the communities, and how do we gain trust and gain an invitation. So I learned a lot from Lorna. She was our
Oh,
mentor.
great.
And so we started the free clinic, and it's hard because you really need that invitation again to avoid that kind of white savior going into certain places and saying, oh, let's give you free this or free that. It's so incredibly inappropriate. So it's about relationship. And it's about that connection and really getting into the community and having authentic relationships, and then saying, oh, this is what we do. So our first place that we worked was a place called On Our Own. And On Our Own was this great facility where folks were leaving mental hospitals and residential programs, and they were on their own for the first time.
Wow.
And it was a daycare place. So you went in, and there were AA meetings, NA meetings, is a safe place. And so we set up a clinic there. And I'm telling you, well, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with stories, but that was amazing. And then
I can
August
imagine.
12th came. And before that, the Pulse Massacre happened in Orlando. And when I watched Emily Ruff, our dear beloved
Yeah.
Emily Ruff, how she mobilized and how she gathered her community, I said, let's do that. So Emily came up, and we had a training session, and she taught about how to work with grief care and all the issues. It was absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant.
And then the white supremacist invasion, Nazi invasion happened in August of 2017. And so the timing was pretty impeccable that we had these resources of how to go into these incredibly vulnerable places and community and how to work with a deeply traumatized community in that realm. And then during COVID and Black Lives Matter in Richmond, we did a lot of frontline work with the protests. And I learned so much. There is this amazing, a Native woman, Vanessa, who was in Standing Rock. I met her there, just amazing woman. So I just served her.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I've learned is, especially as an elder, to go find who is the elder here.
Oh, yeah.
And how do I serve you? And I'm a Scorpio and I got control in my genes, a lot of places. And a hawk just came in and sat down. So emphasizing that control, letting go of control. The stunning hawk is right out the window right now.
Oh.
So what Vanessa did was, I just served her. I said, what are your needs?
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of prison packages. It was marching during COVID. You remember those times. It was incredibly brave. So I love Botanica. When I was writing the book, I kind of passed it on. And so it's been quiescent a little bit. And now I actually just had a meeting and I said, okay, well, what's going to happen? So busy lives, volunteers, super busy. So I'm going to take it back and I'm gestating now. Like, Spirit, where do we go? What are the needs? So it's still profound. We have a huge apothecary and we're starting again in that relationship.
That's so beautiful. I love how you're always listening to the dream world, Kat. It's so beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that because I think it's such a great model for, many other communities in this country. There's one that started in Sonoma County as well that it's really beautiful. Actually, I think was created by the Latino community there. It goes to all of the farms and provides both herbal care, but also many other different modalities, and it's all free care, all donated. So yeah, we're starting to see that happen, and it's people taking the initiative, communities taking the initiative. Yeah, let's talk about the
Absolutely.
individual plants right now. Like I always love hearing about that aha moment. And I know there are many aha moments when the plants grab us, but is there, and I know the stories come to us at different times, but just at this moment, is there like a aha moment that you can think of when the plants just called you to them, where you just, where they just kind of saved you and welcomed you into their magical world?
Well, I think I'll leave the Black Cohosh story for the book, and I'm not trying to sell the book, but if people have read that story, I think I just really have to talk about chickweed.
Oh.
I mean, it's just such an amazing plant that, called to me early on. I do tell this story in the book, but, who really taught me a lot of my herbalism was the Mennonite community here in Virginia.
Oh, really?
And I worked with a midwife, and my midwife friend was really my herbal teacher. And talk about dream world, talk about Scorpio. This woman traveled other realms. I mean, she would wake up before the phone call, get her tea, get her basket,
Be ready.
and be kind of out the door. And so she was so amazingly in tune. And so she did a lot of Mennonite births because, this was not alternative medicine for them.
Yeah.
If they were hemorrhaging, they did not go to the hospital. This was a strict community. So this was the teaching that we had to summon all the forces and we had to be heroic. I mean, this was heroic herbal medicine. And we used a lot of John Christopher's formulas.
God bless him, right? God bless John.
Right? God bless. I mean, I loved his first book. So anyway, so I had a lot of those clients. So they would come to me as an herbalist. And this one beautiful young couple came, brought their baby. Their baby had this horrific impetigo, maybe 3 days old, gnarly, just kind of the purulent. And this hawk is just so all over the window here. So, and heat and just so intense, and they weren't going to go to the doctor. And so I had this dream about chickweed the night before. I thought, I don't know, I was a young herbalist, I hadn't worked, especially with infants, right? So I went, I got the chickweed, we gathered it from, our yard, my yard. Chopped it up, made a compress, put the compress on. I said, I want you to wait here. So they sat, we had tea. I'm telling you, I have no stock in chickweed. When we took that compress off, like 2 hours later, purulent, it was still red and it was still raw, but there was
Yeah.
change. And so they drove a long way, but I said, you've got to bring her back in the morning. I really had to stay close to it. And I couldn't, there was a reason I couldn't go driving. That chickweed, antimicrobial,
Yeah.
anti-infective, clears heat, energetic. And I have used it so powerfully for so long. And it's so
It's so
available,
available
right? I
and it
mean,
tastes so good.
oh my gosh, I know it's out around here.
Oh,
We've been kind of snipping it.
for
Yeah, so there are many aha moments, but I just so love
yeah.
chickweed because it is so
Yeah,
available.
I think I can hear at that moment what happens because chickweed is such a mild herb. You never have, there's no counterindications for it at all. And yet it's so powerful. And I absolutely love that you shared with that because chickweed to me is one of those plants that currently is so overlooked, and it's such a healing, powerful, soothing plant. It's just so available. Yeah, it's great. I always
Well,
love
and it
knowing
was,
which plant just steps up and says, aha, this is what we can do. So that's a great one. So, again, this is kind of an odd question, but can you recall like a defining moment when you felt like you were quote unquote an herbalist? Is there just a moment that you could put that mantle on and say, aha, I am?
well, I guess this is a Facebook moment. You know how you post your best stories and you're not posting, oh my God, I had a flat tire and I got really angry at somebody um, and I love that he picked this up, but Mark Blumenthal has told this story at different conferences. It's about being a community herbalist. And so when I was out of, PA school and still learning the herbs and making minimum
Yeah,
wage at the herb farm, I had a hustle. I had to, make more money, even though I was paying $50 rent, no running water, living how we live,
yeah.
right? Like it was magnificent. It was
It was basic.
beautiful. And we didn't have to come up with bills because we didn't want to be doing that. So it was the days in Virginia when massage was not licensed. So I got, you might know this book, George Downey. It was these hand drawn diagrams of how to learn massage. So I taught myself massage. I got a lot of my friends. I bought a used table and I would go to wealthy Virginia horse country and make a lot of money massaging wealthy
With
horse
your chart.
people. And then go back. I would do that in the morning, and then I'd go back and I'd wander the woods and I'd learn the herbs and I'd study the herbs. So I did that, and then during that time, I would be working with people, but I would never charge because I had no training. And then when in 7 years, literally in 7 years, Rappahannock, Sperryville, Virginia, Little Washington, those folks, my community started referring to me as an herbalist. And that's when I realized I'm literally a community created
Yeah,
herbalist because that's how they see me and that's how they're coming to me. And I kept massaging for a while, but really was the
yeah,
plants. And so, that's kind of the conundrum of so many herbalists. It's like, yeah, you don't quit your day job, but you also have to really, there's that
yeah,
moment when you step in and you really say, all right. And it isn't new age when I say they will be there. When you are in
yeah.
service, they will be there. And, I don't believe it's all good. I believe it all is.
Oh,
And that
powerful.
isness is that Buddhist. Yes, we're here. And there are many things today that aren't good, but it all is. And there's such a generosity, the generosity and beneficence, if that's even a word, of nature extends so beyond our limited realms, which is why I so love the dream world. I so love that ritual place, because I could never have dreamt. Like the life I live now, sitting here talking to you and being the elder, and I wouldn't have dreamt that. The
The plants
plants,
dreamed it.
when you step across that line and you say, I'm in service, and Buhner talks a lot about that.
Oh,
And you show up, it's showing up for them, and something shifts. And it's this deep, deep connection. And that's that connection. And your success and your comfort may look different than what your culture. And when we're talking today about colonization and decolonizing our mind, I think that's one place with herbalism, like decolonizing. What does our success look like? What does my car look like? I mean, we all had beat up Subarus, and we didn't have
if we even had a car.
expensive.
I had my
Right,
car for about the first 30
yeah,
years.
that's why I couldn't go. I mean, that's why I couldn't go visit these Mennonites. I didn't have a car at the time. I didn't want to say, oh, I didn't have a car. And here we are. I've got a great car.
I know.
So yeah, that's
So
I
basically,
can't
what you're
remember
sharing, which I love, is it's really when our community says we're herbalists. It's the same with when we're really ready to practice. It's when your community
Right.
or your family or others are asking, and then you trust the plant. You step up and say, "I am." It's not really, yeah,
Right.
yeah. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, and now we have clinical training programs, and I always liken it to our dear Terrence McKenna. He's saying, if you're holding the ecstatic dose, 5 grams, if you're holding the ecstatic dose in your hand, about to journey, and you're not terrified, then you're not in the right
Oh,
space.
God, that's so beautiful.
And he's really expressing the deep
Yeah.
reverence and where you're about to go. And so I say that to my third-year graduates on the day of graduation. If you're not terrified, then you're not in the right headspace, right? Because now you're about to step into people's intimate spaces, and you're about to become part of people's lives, and really, the power of these plants, and the safety that lies in them, and the ways that they change. They may drink one cup of tea and never go back, but something
Yeah.
shifted for them. So
Yeah, it's
very different.
It's so much about trust, and it's about trusting the plants because we're really in service to them. You've said that in so many incredible ways. Kat, I know you've studied with so many people, and also from very different backgrounds and traditions, but just at this moment, is there like one herbal teacher that you would credit who had a great influence on your work?
Yeah, I would have to say my last herbal teacher, Karen Sanders, and Sarah Holmes, out of Blue Otter Herb School. And, it's, again, I've had incredible, magnificent teachers all along the way. And having on the altar constantly, it's never finishing, and that can be a frustration to herbal students. Like, oh, the more I learn, the more I don't know, and that's such a sign of health and life. And so I think Karen and Sarah's teaching. Karen's Choctaw, and as she said, I teach like an Indian, and there's still parts of my being, my control, my way of hierarchical thinking, that not only the content of her teachings, but the method and how she delivered her teachings had to really pull apart, and it was a disintegration. And that's the whole idea of the entheogens, and it's the disintegration of the ego. But what I found with Karen and Sarah was their very teaching had me I had to rearrange. I had to rearrange certain truths that I held and how she brought the plants in. And, I can't teach that way because, that's what she asks. That's her
Yes.
teaching. And so I can tell stories about it and I can use plants, in that way. But, and she met me. Like I really wanted somebody to push back, and Karen is a
She's a
mighty,
mountain.
mighty force, and Sarah is, a mighty force in a very different way. So I loved that the
Yeah.
energy,
Karen has had
and so
Karen has had I would call her a teacher's teacher. She's had a major influence on American herbalists these days. And everyone who has taken her apprentice programs have just talked about really in the same respectful way that you are, as her ability to, guide them down their own path, and to
mm,
kind of, like you said, push back. She's a mountain. She is such a force. And even when she would come to the
right.
herbal conferences, and she'd be doing these workshops that might be 2 or 4 hours, they would be life changing for people. Yeah, I also will be interviewing her as well for this series because I have, like everyone, I have such incredible respect for her. She's a force and she's so unusual, right? She's just, yeah.
Oh, and she's hysterical. I mean, wait, I'm not going to tell her story because that is so great. You're going to have her. Her story is pretty mind blowing. And, when she wraps you in her bosom, there is like no other mother on the
Yeah.
planet. And, I was with other practitioners in this very, very special apprenticeship. So we traveled in a different way. And, doing these plant journeys with her at the foot of Mount Shasta, I that was the dream. That dream dreamed in. I didn't even hear of her, and I was invited to be part of this by Deb Sewell, and that's that dream. That's that golden thread, and I love that golden thread. It's so important. And can I printed out the
Oh,
poem? Can I
please
read
do.
that? I
Oh,
printed it out, especially, just thinking again of the younger herbalists and going forward. And this is that magic, but this is by William Stafford. And there's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what are you pursuing? You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold on to it, you cannot get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, you suffer, get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread.
awesome.
And so there's times where I think, where is the thread? And then this invitation will come into place. And so I just love that. We can call it spirit, we can call it God, Jesus. We all have our lenses of that power of our lives. But that golden thread was introduced to me by Stephen, by
Oh,
Buhner.
yeah. Another,
So I just love
yeah,
sharing
another
that.
powerful teacher for us on this planet, right? He was actually the inspiration for the Inner Voices, because when he passed away, for this series that we're doing, the Inner Voices of the Elders, when he passed away, I just thought, we told so many stories, and I do have lots and lots of his stories recorded, but I just felt like, oh, this is happening way too soon, right? And it always happens with this generation. It's our time to move on, and new, as we're aging, and we'll see it more and more, and then the new generation comes. So yeah, just the importance of capturing. So Kat, I know that you've worked in, with herbs for so many years, and that I've heard you tell really literally probably hundreds of stories about how the herbs have served in healing ways. And you've done that also in this, just already in our storytelling. But is there a particular story that you want to share with our listeners of when you saw the plants work a miracle, or just some healing story of, on any level? It can be in the dream world or on a physical level.
Sometimes I often say I'll go to my grave in awe of these plants, and like I still never. I'll have clients respond or students, and I'm still like, really? motherwort did that. I still have this incredulity. Um, and so I think that the latest, I had the great, great honor of traveling to South Africa, and I say that as a great honor. My sister works for an NGO that works in food sovereignty and working with childhood nutrition, and so that was really the impetus of us going. That enabled us to travel to South Africa, and what's funny is I had met this young herbalist at the Florida Herbal Conference a number of years ago, and he lived in South Africa. So I got in touch with him, and I said, "Oh, I'm going. Where should I go? What do you recommend?" And so we started this great communication. And so while I was there, he messaged me and he said, "I would love it if you would be able to bring this sacred white root home. You could save me amazing shipping."
Oh,
So it's this whole long story. I was traveling with family and a friend, um, and it was kind of a hassle, and it turned out to be really, really heavy, and we traveled with only two carry-on bags. Like, we did not have extra luggage, but it was the plant, and the plant was all about dream time. And I was traveling with somebody who was having these horrific nightmares, just working through certain things. And it's also a root that works with neurodegenerative diseases. And I was traveling with somebody with
oh,
Parkinson's. And so it was just this amazing piece of, there we were in Africa. And because of it, we went into these incredible herb shops, and, we didn't have a whole lot of time, but just having this powder, having this presence, having this root, that's that relationship. How does that happen? And so none of them ingested it. I did, because it's unknown, and I had to look it up. And is it psychedelic? And, I didn't know it. So, but I don't know if that's that miracle story, but the miracle is, when you're interfacing, and it's all about those
yeah.
connections. And it's about helping. And man, it was very, very powdery. And we got, just the funny stories of traveling with this. And it took me to many places by asking local people
Yeah.
about this root and their story of the root and how they used it. And, they were like, "How do you know about
Yeah.
that root?" And then they would open up. And so it was this portal. It was a familiar portal that really enabled me to relate to local people in a way that I couldn't.
I see the miracle in that story, Kat, quite clearly, because you're following the golden thread, with that plant. Here you're given a plant, and it actually is indicated for two major issues that people you're traveling with, and you were with a very small group, right? It wasn't like you were with a lot of people. And then also
No,
how that plant wove you
right.
into the local communities and took you on your own dream path. Yeah, it's remarkable how the plants do that. But I think in part, so I think that's going on around us in this world all the time, and that it's not really specific to herb people at all, just simply that we open
Absolutely.
up and are more aware. Like, it's like we've said yes to that kind of input, right? And we're aware of that thread
Yes.
that we're holding. I think that's the miracle right there. You are the miracle. But that's a beautiful story.
Well,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. And, it's so funny. Did we choose herbalism? Who chose who? Herbalists are pretty audacious, brilliant. I mean, going to herb conferences, we are surrounded by such
Brilliance. I
brilliance.
know. And multi-talented people, right? Like, I think about a person like Michael Moore or
Absolutely.
Michael Tierra. They're brilliant musicians, like concert pianists, and then they're marvelous mathematicians and incredible scientists and herbalists, and they weave it all together into this amazing, amazing what? Mana for the soul, a feast.
Right. Yeah. So I think the plants are choosing well, and they're choosing more and more and more people because, we go to social media, and there's just so many incredible posts and making tea and the plants. The word is out. And what I loved what Buhner was saying is this is that Gaian impulse. This is not because it's popular. This isn't because it's hip. It is because here we are at this very, very vital transition time. And this is the way our mother's really taking care of us. The word is spreading. And of course, there's always the, notion of conservation, but, the plantains, the chickweeds, there is such
Yeah.
an abundance of these medicines. And so, this is her response, and using all of these dynamic voices. I mean, I've just been working with our friends at Ecoversity and Envision, and, watching, that whole shining the light, and really that energy, that consciousness, that radiation of kind of transcendence, and working with the plants. So, yeah, it's funny. It's like when I'm thinking about the plants choosing, I remember especially going to the New England Women's, and I'd be waiting in an airport, and I'd be like, oh, I know which women are going to that conference. Because, we whether it's the skirts or just this air, just this energy.
We were,
And we come in
we were
all
colorful.
forms, all
We
shapes,
were like a
sizes,
colorful, diverse,
and
you know,
degrees.
floral garden. It was really, I know that what you're saying. There was just an energy. You were talking about this wave of young herbalists, new herbalists coming in, and it makes me think, I know when we were all starting our work, there were certain challenges that we had to face. Um, and maybe you could address that also, but I'm also curious what you're seeing as the current challenges that are the younger generation or the present generation is facing now in their herbal work. It's a broad question, so you can answer that any way you like, but I just like your insights and what you're seeing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I spoke to, some of my issues, fitting in, integrating science and herbalism, and, kind of the long, lonely years of, that
Yeah.
isolating practice. But that in many ways was such a powerful gift because I had to go to the plants. I spent all those hours in the woods,
Yeah.
with friends. I mean, it was hippie carpenters and musicians, and we were living the life. We were wealthy beyond means because we had our freedom. And, we were able to live a lot more simply. So because I didn't have so many online programs or different tools available, we really began with the plants. And, I began my practice with 12 plants. And I was a radical bioregionalist, and I had to know them, I had to harvest them, I made them, I knew them. And I stayed that way for a number of years. So I think for today, again, I'm very excited by all of this
Yeah.
medicine coming forward, and really touching people that from all walks of life, and really getting in between the spaces. Because in between the spaces is really where that ground matrix, that substance, that's where it's all laid down. And that's what nourishes the cells. And that's why the herbs are so subtle yet so powerful. So I think for younger, or I can speak to my students and my graduates, you know, why I think we had so much more freedom is there weren't these societal standards of what success
Oh,
looked like, or possessions, or mortgage, or owning a house till later. And so I'm kind of saddened that early on there's just this whole inculcation of you have to have this, or it has to
yeah.
look like this. And honestly, I didn't have health
My whole life
insurance till
till
I
we went
was
into
40.
Medicare, right?
Yeah, I know. I know. I had it, when I got pregnant at my elder mother home birth in a under, anyway, it was an ecstatic birth, but I was like, oh, maybe I should get insurance. But, we were not bound, and so there's this whole fear. And I can't tell people, well, you don't need insurance. It's not my place. But they're coming into a world where these young, healthy people, I need to do this to get health insurance. And so, that's
Yeah.
different. We did have those freedoms. So, the hard part of disentangling and really saying, what do I need, and what is authentic, and what is my golden thread? Because I think the world is louder.
Yeah.
Social media is bringing in so many more images, so many more expectations, or, I don't look like that, or I don't have that presence, or that TikTok just went viral. It's this whole swiping kind of vata, affecting
Yeah.
our nervous
Yeah.
system. So, it's, everybody has to make that decision, and they have families. And it's that courage. It's that courage, kind of to be poor, if you will. But our poverty was so deeply nourishing, and I hope that's I'm expressing that in looking at poverty, and not at all saying I had poverty at that time. I'm being very, very mindful, of my color, of my privilege. But I didn't have a car. I
Yeah.
didn't have running
Same.
water, and I didn't have a trust fund, and I didn't have insurance. And we went and got our own food, and this was
It was
years.
clearly a
So,
choice. I want to
um,
say that it was a choice because any one of us, if we wanted, could have gone and gotten quote unquote the regular jobs, but we were trusting of this other energetics that was happening and running through us. And there was also for us at that
thank
time, like right now, the movement that we're seeing is the movement of the internet. And like you say, so much commercialization of herbalism. Our movement at that time of the 70s and the 80s was back to the land, driven by people like Helen and Scott Nearing and Juliet de Berkeley Levy. So our teachers and our guides of this other generation were those people who were breaking from the system. I think that's kind of what you're sharing. We chose to live, really, we did choose to live these very simple lives because they would take us back to what we craved and yearned for the most, which was this relationship with nature and the earth. So,
Right. Thank you so much. And thank you for, rebalancing. When I use that word poverty, that wasn't the right word. It was that simple.
yeah,
It was choosing that. And thank you so much for, bringing that in, and the whole focus on
yeah,
materialism. Always been there, but not as it is today. It's profound. So, my heart is with,
yeah,
younger generations and all that they, were born into. 20 years ago, they walked right into this time. And it's how
yeah,
do you process that, and how do you deal with that? And I am
yeah.
blown away. I am so in awe. I feel so tended. I feel that we're going to be okay when I watch
Yes,
their teachings and their depth, and how they're taking, the alchemy and the distillation and the astrology, and they're taking our foundational teachings and foundational native and foundational African. I mean, there were amazing Black herbalists around here that I learned from, and had certain, they passed early, but so there's all kinds of foundations. And yet I'm just in awe of the creativity and courage in other ways
yeah,
that I'm watching 20, 30, 40-year-old herbalists just really taking
I
it and
know.
going further, and bringing in other
I know.
aspects of it,
I
in a
agree so
really,
fully with you. It's very exciting to see, but it's also, I think, also important to look at what were the challenges then and what they are now, because they are very different. We created a foundation, and they're soaring on that and creating a foundation that really the next generation of plant lovers and earth advocates will stand on as well. It's fun to see that, to know that they're just building blocks that will continue. And so that's why it's so important that we really look at the blocks that we're putting down. It's important to look at the foundation that each generation is building to pass on. I don't think we oftentimes pause to think about it in that way, but it is kind of exciting to see. Well, our time, we're coming close, and I had a couple other things I wanted to ask you. So you've talked about a number of herbs, but I just was wondering what plants you would consider like your allies, plants that have always just showed up for you, that are, I know you mentioned chickweed earlier. And are there other plants that you just consider your plant allies that you just can lean on and know they're going to be there for you?
Yeah. I do want to go back to one thing about those
Oh,
blocks
yeah.
in the foundation because, Rosemary, United Plant Savers is one of those absolute foundational building blocks that you and others, others, but your vision, because there is rarely a younger herbalist I see on social media that is not addressing that issue. So that now
Yes.
has become a language. Just as the lens of allopathy, there is now the lens of ecology, conservation, and that's so much in part of the magnificence of your foundation and Sarah
Yeah.
Katz and Linda and Susan Leopold and all these great leaders, all the board folks and Paul Strauss, but that has become a very
Yeah.
fluent language, and so
Thank
I
you.
just had to go back and really talk about those blocks. So motherwort, motherwort,
Really? Oh,
motherwort. What's not to love about motherwort? Um, I can find there's just so many places that motherwort
that's
comes up in my
awesome.
practice. And I don't know if you want me to go into the
I want you
uses
to
or if you just
share a
want me
little
to
bit about
name the
Motherwort
plant.
because she's a powerful being. Yeah, please do.
So I love drop doses. I think drop doses can be physiologic. I don't ever use, maybe sometimes in an acute crisis, I might use up to a half a
Okay.
teaspoon, but it's a vasodilator. She's a relaxant. And she really does embody, like if you were to imagine being held by your mother, physiologically, what would happen to you? And so there would be this dropping. You would drop into your sense of self, you would drop into
Yeah.
your heart space, and you would have this movement because comfort isn't just sedation. Comfort is
Yeah.
moving and it moves the blood and it helps communication better because you're safer. And when you feel safe, you're going to communicate and you're going to regulate. And, safety is such an important part of healing. And so I feel motherwort as a vasodilator, as a bitter. It's very cooling for all cycles. I remember referring to teachers. Susan Weed was a major teacher of
Yeah.
mine 30 years ago. And for years, for PMS, I went on her formula, and her formula is 10 drops starting at ovulation. And once you start bleeding, you stop the motherwort because motherwort can increase bleeding, and it will. 10 drops from ovulation to beginning of bleeding. Do that for 3 months. And I have seen cycles really change over, really get into much greater
Yeah.
space and peace and comfort. And then I learned more herbs and got really complicated. And now I'm kind of returning, like my apothecary is
Yeah.
getting smaller. And I'm really saying, okay, bioregional, time's up. We got to do it. It's now. So anyway, motherwort comes for many different reasons, and especially for
Really?
anxiety. And I will say, working with younger people, I really see a lot of nervous system disorders because of the world, and so I think motherwort is very, very important there. I'm a huge fan of burdock. I do not think burdock is all that bitter. Like it's not one of my
No.
go-to bitters. I think
It's
it's
sweet.
very sweet. I think it's nourishing and building and the whole doctrine of signatures. I say you don't get a certificate from me if you haven't dug a complete down
Oh
to
my
the tip burdock, because you need a tamping bar, and you're there for hours, and it's
Oh,
patience, and it digs deep into the earth, and I use it for chronic conditions because the chronicity buries things, and you put
yeah,
layers and layers. And when I'm working with long time diabetes or whatever, I love that burdock. It's
yeah.
super gentle, it's super sweet, but over a period of time, it'll go deep. And it'll reach deep into that place where, okay, here we are. This is where we really want to work from. So I love burdock, of course,
Yeah.
dandelion, all different forms. In fact, I'm drinking my tea. Is it's springtime, right? Spring is coming, and not up there, but it's coming around here. And so I
Oh,
have my root
nice.
blend. I'm getting my liver. I'm kind of living, in that root time now,
Yeah.
and drinking the roots, and then some of the mushrooms I put in there. I'm just kind of stirring, and of course, dandelion is a major part of that.
Oh,
Um, Scutellaria. I mean, skull cap. It's so me. I mean, I think if I were to have one herb that I've
yeah,
taken pretty consistently, it's skull cap, and I've had some knockdown, interesting conversations with herbalists, and I
yeah,
love dried skull cap. And he say dried skull cap is compost, but I think dried skull cap tea should be in our water system. I just think it's beautiful. All those horse people that I worked with, they would fall and they'd have injuries, but they'd have to do the dressage and get back on the horse. And I found
really?
Scutellaria amazing for pain, but staying present. And so
Yeah,
everybody's different, of course. Sometimes skullcap, will put you to sleep. But for me, it's that it's such a great pain remedy. And yet, by kind of slowing down that roof brain
yes,
chatter, some of the performers, or they
yes,
had focus. And so the medicine's in the dose. But for me, I run hot, I'm chatty, I, love thinking.
yeah,
So Scutellaria is really wonderful. And we've grown now Bicol. So now I can use Bicol skull cap, which I've been
yeah,
waiting to, because so many people have been singing her praises, but now that we're growing it, I feel able to
yeah,
use Bicol, and to clear heat and COVID. I used
yeah,
Bicol a lot for
yeah.
COVID
That's an
times.
incredible list of herbs, sweetie. Those
Yeah.
are, I can see you.
Yeah, I can keep going. I mean, maybe I'll just
Oh,
wrap up with plantain. And here's a great little plantain story. So the midwife that I learned herbalism from, her son had stepped on a sewing needle, like a long sewing needle for a machine. And it was the only time he went to a doctor. He was like 11, went and got his leg x-rayed, and it was way up there.
ooh,
So they said, well, we're probably going to have to go in surgery. And she said, okay, give me 2 weeks. So we used homeopathic, what is it? Sulfa. It's the remedy that expels unwanted objects
oh,
from your
yeah.
body, because your body wants to get rid of stuff, right?
Silica.
Silica. It was homeopathic, which, and plantain soaks 3 times a day, and slippery elm poultices. And I'm telling
I
you,
believe
this
it.
is true story. So not coming out, not coming out. And of course, she's a midwife. She had this enamel wash basin. And so we had this breakfast, big breakfast. We're on our way back to the doctor. He lifts his foot, and
Oh,
we hear that ping. And it could have been gravity.
yeah,
He couldn't walk on it. It could have just been time. I know that plantain was
absolutely.
just gently, gently calling that out. And a year later, that same young boy on the same foot got bit by a copperhead, did not go to the hospital, echinacea and plantain. And and then a year later, his skin shed. So that boy's a medicine
Yeah,
boy.
definitely.
But anyway, lots of uses for planting.
Kat, I love that you of your plant allies, except for the Baikal skullcap, are all those really common herbs that we find in our backyards everywhere across the temperate regions of the world. That those allies, and for most of us, that's the
Right.
truth. There are these plants that just are there waving at us constantly. Yeah, I love all of those plants too. Every time you talked about one, I could feel my heart pounding. Well, we're sort of coming near the end. I just had a couple things more I wanted to ask you. One is there's so much that you've done, and we've only just barely touched on it in this interview. So much that you shared with the world and gifted the world with. But when you look at what your life with the plants and as an herbalist, what are you most proud of that you've done? Is there anything that just jumps out at you that you just feel the best about?
Oh, I'm going to start crying. Um, because I just went into my heart, and I think it's showing up for them. Really falling so deeply in love with them that we've committed our days, our lives, our beliefs. Um, it is the graduates, it is all the schools and practices and beautiful apothecaries in Charlottesville from my graduates. It's all of that. When you asked that question, and I dropped into my heart, and that hawk is now
Are
sitting
you
on a
kidding?
flowering camellia.
He's still there with us?
Um, uh, Oh, I mean, I didn't want to be obnoxious and keep talking about this stunning hawk. He has been right there, but he just moved to a flower. Um, I, I think being given the honor and the privilege and the space um, to just fully embrace and drop deeper and deeper and deeper in love with the plants, which then acknowledges myself and all of those that I come in contact with, and the incredible privilege of meeting so many people I
Yeah.
would never meet through these magnificent beings. So for me, I have to say it's the love I feel. And I never would have thought about that. So thank you. Thank you for that
Yeah,
question.
it's just always
Um,
such a reflective
yeah.
question. Yeah, I hear that very deeply, and I feel it in my heart when you're speaking. And I also, when I look at what I think of one of your great accomplishments, I can like pull out lots of different threads. I mean, there's so many things. But I think one of the things is this incredible
Mm,
offering of your new book that you wrote, Energetic Herbalism. It's just such a magnificent book in the way that it ties the different traditions together and makes them so accessible and understandable, and also allows us to see how all of these great systems that evolved are all very similar. They have their differences, but they really are about understanding the energetics of the plants, and each culture kind of develops their own way of communicating that, and you tied that all together. It's such a great book, and I'm just so grateful. I know
mm.
you worked on it for almost 2 or 3 years, right? It was a really big task for you. You weren't available very much. I know every time I email you, I'm on a writing retreat, you'd be writing away. But and I had the great honor, thank you so much, of allowing me and asking me to write the forward for it. So that book has become massively popular. I know that it's a, really referenced textbooks already for people. So yeah, I just want to let people know
Thank
about
you.
that book. Do you want to say a few words about that process of writing it, or what?
Yeah. Well, it was an honor for me. I mean, it was your light, Rosemary, that really, and that Neha funky little community center. So of course, going back to origin, and really, you know, honoring the book with having your writing there. It's my 3 year curriculum, and I knew at one point I would stop, teaching. So essentially, the book is what I teach in 3 years, all in one version. And the interesting part of the process is, of course, I've been working on it for years, writing curriculum. But when the contract came in from Chelsea Green, I had 7 months. So that was, really a very intense process. But fortunately, it was during, um, well, it was during pandemic, so I was blessed with the seclusion of that. But I want to say what's magnificent to me is what the reflection of people, they like the content, but it's the stories. Like more than anything, people come back with
Yes.
gratitude for the stories. And that's what I really want to, maintain going forward. It's got to always be in the storytelling form, and that's that clinical experience. We have the stories. This isn't an intellectual. We have the clients, and I was thinking about you the other day because I did get this email from this woman kind of writing to Sacred Planet like we're a big institution, and had a question about the book. And she was from New Zealand, and she said, we have a book club and we decided we're going to spend a whole other year on the book. Well, I immediately email her and say, oh my God, I will never be famous enough not to get so ecstatic. And we set up a Zoom. I'm like, I totally want to show up in your book club. But the excitement of the stories and where it's showing up. I mean, I'm in awe that it's in its third printing and it's really getting out there. But it's that sacred. It's the sacred that is woven in to all of the different traditions. And so, really making the energetics
Yes.
very intuitive, very simple. I remember learning Chinese medicine thinking, I could never
Yeah.
begin to study this or teach this. I was about to go to China. And then this piece of land said, we need you. And I ended up buying property in Rappahannock. I was on my way taking that money to go to China. I was like, so, oh, I've got to do China. So anyway, so then I finally realized, no, these are gems. These are pearls we
Yeah.
can distill and we can make
Yeah.
this available. Because Chinese teachers and Ayurvedic teachers very freely brought it here. Vasant Lad brought it here and wanted to share it. And so these were traditions. I felt very comfortable. It was taught by me and it was said, teach this.
Well,
So yeah, it was a beautiful, hard process, and just I'm very excited that people really love
yeah.
the stories, and there's a lot in it. So it's definitely not a cover to cover read, but it's been
Yeah.
fun.
It's
It's been
neat
really
how when a book is
wonderful.
done, it goes out in the world like, like you give birth to it and you work really hard on it. And then it goes out into the world like an adult, it has its own life. And then you find out it's being read by people in all different worlds. And as years go by, it'll stop in and you'll see it somewhere at a bookstore or somebody will mention it again. But I really see it like an adult child that's gone into the world. And the other thing that you just stated that I did want to mention is I just love how herbalists always throughout history have shared traditions. It's like traditions have traveled and they're living. Anything that
Mm.
becomes stagnant, of course, dies. So these traditions are always living and changing and moving. And yes, they are based on ancient principles, but herbalists have always shared those. Like what we're creating here as a Western herbal tradition is like also will be always changing and being shared with the rest of the world. It already is being shared, and people are adapting the ways that American herbalists are doing something. So it's something that I've loved about herbalism, how the plants themselves move from culture to culture. They move and literally move. They find ways to travel and move around, and the teachings do too. It's mostly by the elders, who pass those teachings on because they're important living traditions. So yeah, I just want to thank you. We've come to the end of our time, but I just want to thank you so much, Kat. I love you so much, and it's always such a pleasure to spend time with you. And it's also wonderful to invite all of these people to be listening in and to share, just the magnificence of who you are and your wonderful stories and your gifts to the world. So, yeah, so people can find you at your website. Do you want to share where they can tune in for that and where they can get in?
Sure. Yeah, it's a sacredplanttraditions.com. And that's our website. And our offerings are there. As I said, there's no longer a 3 year program. But we're just changing. It's evolving. I'm really listening. This is sort of my transition year, actually. This is the first year I haven't taught the 3 year program. So it's interesting. It's really unknown. Just really listening. Okay, where do I serve next? What's the next evolution for that? But there are some great classes on there as well as other resources. So that's Sacred Plant Traditions, and
Thank you so
we're
much.
in Charlottesville.
You have so many
And we're
wonderful offerings on your course, on your website, and we'll also have the website listed on our podcast as well. So thank you, dear. I love you so much, and thank you all of our friends for listening.
I love you so much. Yeah, thank you. This is so fun. Well, it's always so easy to talk. It's the story time, right? Very beautiful. Thank you so much, Rosemary. And I just want to give a shout out to your amazing team, Emma and Helen. I mean, it does take a village, especially, as we're elders. And it's like, okay, let's download Firefox. And, all of that is just so safe and supportive. And yeah, I
Thank you,
just really am
darling.
I'm
appreciative.
thankful